Dominic Caldwell didn't even look up from his phone. He was standing in the entrance hall of his father's estate when the front door opened and Zara Collins walked in. Swift Hall uniform, worn sneakers, a sealed parcel under her arm. He glanced up, and that was enough for him. "Margaret." He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. "Why is there a black girl walking through my father's front door? Service entrance exists for a reason." Margaret stared at the floor. Zara kept walking. Dominic stepped forward. "You people always do this. They give you clear instructions and somehow it never registers." He shook his head slowly, like a man watching something sadly predictable. "Or maybe the rules just don't apply to you. Is that it?" Zara said nothing. She breathed, slowly, the way her mother taught her when she was 9. Dominic turned toward the staircase. Threw the last one over his shoulder like loose change. "Margaret, when she's done, she leaves through the back. I don't want her wandering the property like she belongs here." He never looked back. Zara followed Margaret down the hall, not knowing that in 3 minutes, she would see something that would unravel 22 years of silence. Drop a comment. Where are you watching from? If stories like this matter to you, subscribe. You don't want to miss what happens next. The alarm on Zara Collins's phone went off at 5:10 in the morning, and she was already awake. She'd been lying on the couch for the past hour, staring at the water stain on the ceiling. The one shaped vaguely like the state of Florida. The one the landlord had promised to fix 7 months ago and hadn't touched. The apartment was quiet, except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the occasional sound from Beverly's room. A shifting of weight, a slow, careful breath. The sounds of a woman sleeping lightly because her body had stopped letting her sleep any other way. Zara reached over and silenced the alarm before it could ring a second time. She sat up carefully, folding the thin blanket she used as a sheet, and placed it on the arm of the couch the way she did every morning. Neat, deliberate, like if she kept the small things orderly, the larger things might follow. She was 22 years old. She hadn't slept in a bed in 14 months, not since Beverly's illness had gotten bad enough that the stairs became a problem, and they'd moved everything to the ground floor. The bedroom was Beverly's now. The couch was Zara's. Neither of them talked about it. She moved quietly through the narrow kitchen, starting the coffee maker, pulling out the 2 mugs that didn't have chips in the rim. She checked the whiteboard on the refrigerator door, the one they used to track Beverly's schedule. Dialysis, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. Dr. Marsh, follow-up Friday, 2:15 p.m. Prescription refill, due Thursday. Below that, in Zara's own handwriting, a number circled in red marker, $4,800. The amount currently overdue across 3 separate medical bills. Below the number underlined twice, $203, their checking account balance. Zara looked at that number for a long moment. Then she poured the coffee. Beverly appeared in the kitchen doorway at 5:30, moving slowly, one hand trailing along the wall. She was 49 years old, but had started carrying herself like someone older, careful, conserving like every movement was a calculation. She had Zara's same high cheekbones, the same watchful eyes, but where Zara's face was tight with the particular tension of someone fighting hard. Beverly's had gone quiet. Not defeated, just deeply, exhaustedly still. "You didn't have to make coffee," Beverly said. "I was up anyway." Beverly sat at the small kitchen table and wrapped both hands around her mug. "What time is your first pickup?" 6:15, distribution center on Harwell. Zara leaned against the counter. "Then I've got a route through Midtown, and there's a last-minute priority delivery that came through last night. Private estate out in Pinecrest Heights. Pays 67 flat plus a rush bonus." Beverly nodded slowly. Pinecrest Heights. She said it like a fact about somewhere far away. "Long drive. 40 minutes maybe. Worth it." Zara paused. Dr. Marsh called yesterday about the specialist referral. The kitchen went quiet. I know, Beverly said. The appointment is next Thursday. The consultation alone is... I know, Zara. Mom, I said I know. Beverly's voice was soft but final, the way it got when she had decided a conversation was finished. She looked down at her coffee. I'll handle it. Zara didn't argue. She had learned over 14 months of this that arguing with Beverly about money was like arguing with weather. Her mother had spent 22 years handling things alone, and silence had become her primary language for it. Instead, Zara finished her coffee, changed into her Swift Hall uniform in the bathroom navy blue, her name stitched in white thread above the left pocket, and checked her delivery manifest on her phone. 11 stops. Last one, 4 Whitfield Drive, Pinecrest Heights. Recipient R. Caldwell. Parcel type sealed legal document. Instruction note, priority residential. Personal delivery to recipient only. Do not leave at door. She'd never delivered to Pinecrest Heights before. She'd driven through it once by accident, when her GPS had rerouted her around a highway closure. She remembered the feeling, the streets widening, the trees getting older and taller, the houses set so far back from the road, they looked like suggestions. She'd felt the shift the way you feel a change in air pressure, like crossing into a different country that happened to share a zip code. She kissed Beverly on the top of the head on her way out. Beverly caught her hand. Be careful today, she said. It was what she always said. Zara had always assumed it was the ordinary kind of careful traffic, late pickups, difficult customers. She had no reason to think it meant anything more specific than that. Always am, Zara said. She drove through Atlanta in the thin early light, the city still half asleep around her. She made her first 10 deliveries by 10:45 apartment lobbies. Office reception desks, a florist who signed for 3 boxes without looking up, a man in a bathrobe who seemed genuinely surprised anyone had come to his door. Standard morning. Nothing that prepared her for what came next. At 11:20, she turned onto Whitfield Drive. The street was lined with oak trees, so old, their roots had begun lifting sections of the sidewalk. The houses, she couldn't call them houses, really. They were estates. They were institutions sat behind iron fencing and stone walls and gates that opened only when someone inside decided they should. She drove slowly, watching the addresses, feeling the familiar low-grade discomfort of being somewhere that had been designed in ways both obvious and invisible to make people like her feel like visitors. She pulled up to number 4 and pressed the intercom. A pause. Then a woman's voice, clipped and professional. Name and purpose. Zara Collins, Swift Hall Delivery. Priority parcel for R. Caldwell. Personal delivery per the order instructions. Another pause, longer than it needed to be. Then the gate swung open. Zara drove up the curved driveway and parked near the front steps. She sat for a moment, looking at the house. 3 stories of pale stone and dark wood. Ivy on the east wall. Windows that caught the midday light and held it. A brass nameplate beside the front door that she was too far away to read, but somehow already knew would say exactly what it said. She grabbed the parcel, climbed the front steps, rang the bell. The door opened, and Dominic Caldwell was already there. Margaret led Zara down a hallway that felt like the inside of a museum. The walls were lined with framed things, certificates, commendations, photographs of Raymond Caldwell, shaking hands with people Zara vaguely recognized from news coverage. Senators, a former attorney general, 2 presidents, different decades. The carpet runner beneath her feet was dark burgundy, the kind that absorbed sound so completely that her footsteps disappeared. She could hear her own heartbeat. They passed a formal dining room, a sitting room, with furniture arranged so precisely it looked staged. and what appeared to be a private library. Shelves reaching 12 feet high, a rolling ladder on a brass rail. Leather chairs positioned near a fireplace that hadn't been used recently, but had been used often. The whole house smelled of old paper and wood polish and something else underneath, something harder to name. Authority, maybe. The particular smell of a place where important decisions had been made for a very long time. Margaret stopped at a heavy wooden door at the end of the hall. She knocked twice quietly and opened it without waiting for a response. "The delivery, sir," she said. Then she stepped aside and Zara walked in. The study was smaller than she expected, more personal. The bookshelves here were less curated, actual working shelves, books pulled at angles, papers tucked between spines. Post-it notes in colors flagging specific pages. A leather desk chair that had been reupholstered at least once. A banker's lamp with a green glass shade. And behind the desk, turned slightly away, looking out the window at the garden beyond, was Raymond Caldwell. He was older than the photographs in the hallway, mid-70s, white-haired, the kind of lean that came from decades of discipline rather than luck. He had the posture of someone who had spent 40 years being the most important person in every room he entered, and whose body had simply never stopped performing that fact. Even seated, even turned away, he radiated something, not warmth, something more like gravity. He turned when he heard her enter. "Your delivery, sir," Margaret said again from the doorway. Raymond looked at Zara with the brief assessing gaze of a man who processed people quickly. "Set it on the desk," he said. His voice was measured, unhurried. The voice of someone who had never needed to raise it to be heard. Zara crossed the room. She was 2 steps from the desk when she saw it. She stopped. Right there on the corner of that mahogany desk, next to a stack of legal briefs, and a yellow legal pad covered in neat, precise handwriting, and inexplicably a plastic Whataburger cup with a smiling mascot printed on the side, was a framed photograph. 5 inches by 7. Simple silver frame. The kind of frame you buy because you want what's inside it to matter, not the frame itself. The photograph showed 2 people standing outside what was clearly a federal courthouse, tall stone steps, columns in the background, afternoon light falling at the angle that meant late summer. The man on the left was younger, maybe 50, but recognizably Raymond Caldwell. He was smiling in the photograph, and it transformed his face completely, loosened it, made him look like someone who laughed easily. Someone who had not yet become the gravity-pulling figure behind this desk. The woman on the right was laughing. She was in her late 20s, wearing a dark blazer over a white blouse, her hair pulled back. She had high cheekbones and watchful eyes, and she was laughing at something just outside the frame, turned slightly toward it, caught mid-moment, unguarded. Around her left wrist was a small silver bracelet that caught the light. Zara knew that bracelet. It lived in a shoebox under Beverly's bed. Zara had seen it twice in her life, once when she was 12, and had gone looking for a birthday card she thought Beverly had stored there, and once 3 years ago when she'd helped her mother move the box to reach a water shutoff valve during a leak. Both times Beverly had closed the box quickly, without explanation, in the particular way she closed things that were not up for discussion. The parcel slipped from Zara's fingers. She caught it before it hit the desk, barely, her hands suddenly clumsy and strange, like they belonged to someone else. She looked at the photograph for a long time. Long enough that the silence in the room changed texture. That was her mother's face. 20-something years younger, laughing, standing on courthouse steps, beside a federal judge, but her mother's face. The specific curve of her jaw. The way her eyes crinkled at the outer corners. The set of her shoulders, that particular upright posture that Beverly had, and that Zara had inherited, and that no photograph could fake. Her mother. In a silver frame. On a billionaire's desk. In a house Zara had been told to enter through the service entrance. She looked up. Raymond Caldwell was watching her. He had been watching her, she realized, since she'd stopped moving. His expression was unreadable, not blank exactly, but controlled in the way that only happens when something underneath is moving very fast and very hard, and the surface is working to contain it. Zara set the parcel on the desk. Her voice came out quieter than she intended, and steadier, which surprised her. "Sir?" She pointed at the photograph. Her finger was not entirely steady. "Why do you have a photo of my mother?" The room fell silent. Not the ordinary silence of a quiet house. Something heavier. Something that had weight and shape, and had clearly been waiting for a very long time to fill exactly this space. Raymond's pen rolled off the edge of the desk and hit the carpet without a sound. He looked at the photograph. Then he looked at Zara. Really looked the way he had not looked when she first walked in. The way you look at someone when you are suddenly seeing more than one thing at once. Something moved across his face. Recognition. And beneath it something raw. Something that looked almost like fear. "What," he said slowly, "is your mother's name?" "Beverly," Zara said. "Beverly Collins." Raymond was quiet for a moment, that stretched uncomfortably long. Then he said carefully, "Collins." "Yes." "And before that?" Zara felt something shift in her chest, a small cold movement like a gear catching. "What do you mean before that?" Raymond didn't answer immediately. He stood slowly, the way men his age stood, when they were conserving something energy composure time, and walked to the window. He stood with his back to her for a moment, looking out at the garden. His hands, she noticed, were clasped behind him, tightly. "How old are you?" he asked. 22. He nodded once, almost imperceptibly, like that confirmed something he had already calculated. "Is she well?" he asked. "Your mother?" The question landed strangely. Too specific. Too careful. Not who is your mother or I don't know what you're talking about, but is she well, the question of someone who has a right to ask, or believes they do. "She's sick," Zara said. "She's been sick for a while. Why do you have her photograph?" Raymond turned from the window then. He looked at Zara for a long moment, directly without the social performance of pleasantry, and something in his expression shifted from controlled to something older and more honest. "Sit down," he said. "I'd rather stand." A pause. He almost smiled, not warmly, but with something like recognition. "She used to say the same thing," he said quietly. "Every time I told her to sit down in a meeting, she'd say she'd rather stand." He moved back to his desk chair and lowered himself into it slowly. "Your mother worked in this courthouse 23 years ago. Not this house, the federal courthouse on Spring Street. She was a paralegal in the civil division. One of the sharpest legal minds I'd encountered in 30 years on the bench." He paused. "She was 26 years old." Zara said nothing. She was listening with every part of herself. "She came to me in the fall of 2001 with something she had found. Documents, internal communications, evidence that 2 senior judges in the district were accepting payments from a law firm, Hargrove and Stren, in exchange for favorable rulings in high-value civil cases. We're talking about millions of dollars in settlements being redirected. People who deserved justice being denied it, systematically, deliberately." Raymond's voice was steady, but his hands on the desk were not. "She had been collecting the evidence for 4 months before she brought it to me. 4 months alone, telling no one because she didn't know who she could trust." "What did you do?" Zara asked. Raymond was quiet for a moment. "I believed her immediately. The evidence was irrefutable, and I was afraid." He said the last 4 words without flinching, which somehow made them worse. Not for myself, or not only for myself. The people involved had reach, real reach. Two of the judges she was implicating had connections to the state appellate court, to law enforcement, to people whose names you would recognize if I said them. He looked at his hands. Within a week of Beverly bringing the evidence to me, someone broke into her car. A note on her dashboard. Drop it or disappear. The room was very still. I told her I would handle it. Raymond continued. I told her to step back. Let me work through the right channels, stay quiet and stay safe. And she did. She trusted me. He paused. The silence had weight. I made the wrong decision. I went through internal channels that I believed were secure and were not. Within 2 weeks, Beverly was formally reassigned to a different division, a demotion in everything but name. Her security clearance was quietly revoked. And then one morning, she simply wasn't there anymore. She left, Zara said. She disappeared, Raymond said. There's a difference. Leaving implies a choice made freely. What Beverly did, I believe now, and I should have understood then, was survive. She understood that staying connected to me, to that courthouse, to that evidence made her a target. So she removed herself completely. He looked at the photograph. I tried to find her. For almost 2 years I tried. Private investigators. Every contact I had. Nothing. She had changed her name and vanished, and she had done it so thoroughly that I eventually had to accept that she didn't want to be found. He reached into the desk drawer and removed a white envelope aged at the edges, Beverly's name written across it in careful script. I wrote this in 2003. I never sent it because I had no address to send it to. Zara looked at the envelope but didn't reach for it. The corruption, she said. What happened to it? I pursued it. Quietly, slowly, without Beverly's evidence which she had taken with her, and which I later understood she had kept. Raymond's voice tightened slightly. It took 6 years. 2 judges took early retirement under pressure. Hargrove and Stren was eventually disbarred in 2009 on unrelated charges that were related. It was incomplete justice, the kind that happens when powerful people are allowed to negotiate their own exits. He paused. Beverly never knew. She was gone before any of it resolved. She never knew that what she found, what she risked her life to bring forward, actually mattered. Zara stood in the center of the study and felt the floor shift beneath her in a way that had nothing to do with the floor. Her mother had been a paralegal with a legal mind sharp enough to build a case against federal judges. Her mother had been threatened and forced to run and had rebuilt herself from nothing, a new name, a new city, a couch she'd surrendered to her own daughter without a word of explanation. Her mother had carried this alone for 22 years, and then Zara did the math. Beverly had disappeared in late 2001. Zara had been born in the summer of 2002. She looked at Raymond Caldwell sitting behind his desk. His hands still, his face open in a way it hadn't been when she walked in. She didn't ask the question out loud. She didn't have to. She could see from the way he was looking at her that he was already waiting for it. Zara drove home in silence. Not the comfortable kind. The kind that fills a car, like water fills a sealed room slowly, completely, until there is no space left for anything else. She kept both hands on the wheel and her eyes on the road, and did not let herself think, not fully, not yet, because she was still 40 minutes from home and she needed to be able to drive. She had taken a photograph. Discreetly, while Raymond was looking at the envelope, she had raised her phone and captured the framed picture on his desk. Beverly's face, the silver bracelet, the courthouse steps, the two of them standing together in late summer light, close enough that their shoulders were almost touching. She looked at the photograph once at a red light on Peachtree Street, Then she put her phone face down on the passenger seat and did not look at it again. Beverly was home when Zara arrived. She was sitting in the living room with a book open in her lap, reading glasses on a cup of tea on the side table that had gone cold. She looked up when Zara came through the door, and her face did the thing it always did. A small automatic softening the particular expression that Beverly reserved only for her daughter, the one that said, "You're here good. I was waiting." It lasted about 2 seconds. Then Beverly looked at Zara's face and the softening stopped. "What happened?" she said. Zara didn't answer right away. She set her delivery bag by the door. She took off her jacket and hung it on the hook. She did these things slowly and deliberately because she was trying to organize herself before she spoke, and because some part of her understood that once she said the next words, something would change that could not be unchanged. She crossed the room and held out her phone. Beverly looked at the screen. The water glass on the side table, Zara hadn't even noticed Beverly had picked it up, slipped from her hand, and hit the hardwood floor. It didn't break. It bounced once and rolled under the coffee table, and neither of them moved to retrieve it. Beverly's face had gone the color of old paper. She was staring at the photograph on Zara's phone with an expression Zara had never seen on her mother's face before. Not in 22 years of watching this woman navigate every hard thing life had handed them. Beverly Collins did not shatter. Beverly Collins did not come apart. It was simply not something she did. But she was doing it now. Her hands were shaking. Both of them visibly, the phone trembling in her grip. Her mouth had opened slightly, and her breath was coming in shallow, uneven pulls, like she had forgotten the automatic part of breathing and was having to do it manually. "Mom," Zara said quietly. Beverly didn't respond. "Mom, I need you to look at me." Slowly, Beverly raised her eyes from the phone. "I delivered a package to a house in Pinecrest Heights today," Zara said. "4 Whitfield Drive. The resident is Raymond Caldwell. He's a retired federal judge." She paused. "He has a photograph of you on his desk, from a courthouse. You're wearing the bracelet that's in the shoebox under your bed." Another pause, shorter. "He knew your name before Collins. He asked me what your name was before Collins." The room was completely silent. "And I need you," Zara said, and her voice broke slightly on the word need before she pulled it back, "to tell me who he is to you. Because I did the math, Mom. I know how to do math. And I need you to tell me." Beverly set the phone down on the cushion beside her. She took her glasses off. She pressed the heel of her hand against her eyes for a long moment. And when she lowered it, her face was wet. Zara had seen her mother cry twice in her life. Once at a funeral for a woman from their church when Zara was 7. Once in a hospital waiting room 2 years ago when a doctor had first used the words progressive and irreversible in the same sentence. This was the 3rd time. "Sit down, baby," Beverly said. "I don't want to sit down." Beverly looked at her. "Please." Zara sat. Beverly was quiet for a long time. Long enough that Zara started to count her own heartbeats. She got to 31 before Beverly spoke. "His name is Raymond Caldwell," Beverly said. "I worked for the federal court system when I was 26. I was a paralegal. I was good at it." A pause. "He was a judge. He was fair in a way that most of them weren't. He listened when people talked, even when they were people he didn't have to listen to." She stopped. "We became close, in a way that wasn't appropriate and wasn't simple, and that I understood even then would have consequences." "Did you love him?" Zara asked. Beverly looked at her hands. "Yes." "Did he love you?" "I believe he did. In the way that men in his position love things that complicate their lives genuinely and not enough." Zara absorbed that. He told me about the case fixing, the evidence you found. Beverly's jaw tightened. He had no right. He had every right. It's my history, too. Zara's voice was steady now all the way through. He told me you were threatened, that someone broke into your car, that he tried to find you for 2 years. She paused. Mom, I was born in July 2002. You left the courthouse in late 2001. The words sat in the air between them, plain and irreducible. Is Raymond Caldwell my father? Beverly closed her eyes. The silence lasted 8 full seconds. Zara counted. Then Beverly said so quietly, it was almost not a sound at all. Yes. The word landed in the room like something dropped from a great height, not loud, but final, with the particular weight of a truth that has been held in one person's body for 22 years and has finally unavoidably been set down. Zara sat with it. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. She looked at her mother. This woman who had slept on a couch so her daughter could have a bed, who had called insurance companies 14 times and been put on hold 14 times and paid out of pocket anyway and said nothing, who had carried a name that wasn't hers and a secret that was and felt something move through her that was too large and too complicated to be only one thing. Why didn't you tell him? She finally asked. Beverly opened her eyes. They were dry now. Because telling him meant staying connected, and staying connected meant staying in their crosshairs. She looked at Zara directly. I chose you. I would choose you again. Zara's phone buzzed on the cushion between them. Unknown number. She picked it up. Ms. Collins. A man's voice, measured professional. My name is Howard Finch. I'm Judge Caldwell's private attorney. He asked me to reach out. He'd like to meet with you again privately. He says there are things you deserve to know. A brief pause. He also wanted me to tell you that he's sorry it took this long. Zara looked at her mother. Beverly was looking at the middle distance, her hands folded in her lap, her face carrying the expression of a woman who had known somewhere beneath everything that this phone call was always coming. Zara went back to the estate alone. She didn't tell Beverly. She told her she had a late pickup on the south side, which was not entirely a lie. She did have a pickup, she simply rerouted after it. She sat in her car outside the Caldwell gate for 4 minutes before pressing the intercom, not because she was afraid, but because she wanted to be certain she knew why she was doing this. She was not doing it for money. She was not doing it for Raymond. She was doing it because she had spent 22 years living in the shadow of a story she hadn't been allowed to know, and she had decided, sitting on that couch while her mother slept, that the shadow ended here. The gate opened without her having to speak. They were expecting her. Howard Finch met her at the front door, this time no Dominic in the entrance hall, no Margaret hovering. Just a trim white man in his 60s with silver hair and a careful, neutral expression that Zara recognized as the face of someone professionally skilled at revealing nothing. He shook her hand. His grip was brief and dry and businesslike. He's in the study, Howard said. He asked me to give you privacy. I'll be in the library if either of you needs anything. Raymond was standing when she entered, not seated, which she understood as deliberate. A small concession of respect. He gestured to the chair across from his desk, and this time Zara sat, because this time she chose to. He began without preamble. I had a paternity test run, he said. I know that requires your participation to be admissible, and I'm not presenting it as anything official. I'm telling you because I want you to understand that I'm not operating on sentiment. He placed a single sheet of paper on the desk and turned it to face her. I used a sample from the parcel you handled. I understand that's an unconventional method, and that you didn't consent to it. I'm telling you because you deserve honesty more than you deserve careful legal maneuvering. He paused. The probability is 99.96%. Zara looked at the paper, then at him. You already knew. I suspected the moment I saw you. The test confirmed it. He sat down slowly. I want to help. Your mother's medical situation, the bills, the treatment she needs, the specialist referral Dr. Marsh submitted 3 weeks ago that your mother hasn't scheduled because she can't cover the consultation fee. I can cover everything. I want to. How do you know about Dr. Marsh? Zara asked. Raymond paused only briefly. Howard made some inquiries, discreetly. Zara looked at him steadily. You had someone look into my mother's medical records. Her billing records, which are still her private information. Zara's voice didn't rise. It leveled. I understand you mean well, but my mother has spent 22 years rebuilding a life where nobody goes through her things without asking. So before we talk about what you want to provide, I need you to understand what that cost her. Raymond held her gaze. You're right, he said, simply without qualification. I apologize. Zara accepted this with a nod. Tell me about the letters. He opened the desk drawer and placed the envelope in front of her. She picked it up. The paper was heavy, cream-colored, slightly stiff with age. Beverly's name in his handwriting, neat, precise, the hand of a man who had written thousands of legal opinions and understood that words once committed to paper became permanent. She opened it and read it. It took her 4 minutes. She read it twice. The letter described in careful and unguarded language Raymond's search for Beverly across 2 years. His regret at not acting faster, not going public sooner, not choosing Beverly's safety over institutional self-preservation when it had mattered most. His acknowledgement that silence, even well-intentioned silence, was its own kind of betrayal. The last paragraph said, I don't know if you're safe. I don't know if you're happy. I know only that you were braver than I was, and that I have not stopped being sorry for the gap between what I should have been and what I was. Zara folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. She kept the evidence, Zara said. 22 years. She kept everything in a storage unit. Something moved across Raymond's face. I didn't know that. I found out this morning. She never destroyed it. She never used it. Zara looked at him. She protected it, in case it was ever needed, in case you ever needed it. The room was quiet for a long time. I'd like to meet her, Raymond said finally. When she's ready, if she's ever ready. I'm not asking for anything beyond the chance to say what I should have said 23 years ago. Zara stood. I'll talk to her. She was almost at the door when Howard Finch appeared in the hallway. His neutral expression, slightly altered, tightened at the edges in a way that Zara read immediately as controlled alarm. There's something you should both know, Howard said. He looked at Raymond. Dominic has been making calls. He found out about the delivery, about the visit. A pause. He knows. The silence that followed was different from all the previous silences in that house. Within 48 hours, everything moved. Zara's Swift Hall account was flagged for a formal conduct review, an anonymous corporate complaint filed through a third-party HR portal, alleging a pattern of unprofessional client interactions. Her supervisor called uncomfortable, apologetic, powerless. Suspended pending investigation. The Friday and Saturday waitressing shifts she'd held for 11 months were suddenly overstaffed. The manager texted, not called. We'll reach out when things open up. Then the envelope appeared under their apartment door. A notice from the building management company. Effective 30 days from the date of the letter, their monthly rent would increase by $350. Market adjustment, the letter said. No further explanation. Zara stood in the hallway of their apartment, holding the notice, and understood with a cold and total clarity that this was not coincidence. Her phone rang. She didn't recognize the number, but she answered it. Dominic Caldwell's voice was exactly as she remembered it. Calm, almost pleasant. The voice of a man who was accustomed to being the most powerful person in any conversation he chose to enter. "I think we should talk," he said, "before this goes any further. For everyone's sake." He made it sound like a courtesy, like he was doing her a favor. Zara looked at the rent notice in her hand, at the suspension email still open on her phone, at the door to her mother's room closed, Beverly resting on the other side, unaware. "Fine," Zara said. "Let's talk." They met at a coffee shop on Buckhead Avenue. Dominic chose it, which told Zara something. Not a private office, not the estate, a public place, calculated neutrality. The kind of setting designed to make her feel like this was a reasonable conversation between reasonable people rather than what it actually was. He was already seated when she arrived, wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than 3 months of her rent-a-coffee in front of him that he hadn't touched. He stood when she approached a performance of manners that cost him nothing and was intended to cost her something, to make her feel for a fraction of a second like she was being treated well. Zara sat down without acknowledging the gesture. "Thank you for coming," Dominic said. "You made it fairly difficult not to," Zara said. He smiled briefly. "I want you to know I have nothing personal against you. You seem like an intelligent young woman in a difficult situation. That's exactly why I think you'll understand what I'm about to say." He reached into his jacket and placed a check on the table between them. Face up. $75,000 made out to Zara Collins, signed in Dominic's own hand. "That's more than your mother will make in the next 5 years," he said, his voice carrying the particular tone of a man presenting a logical solution to a logistical problem. "I'm being generous. Most people in your position would take this without asking questions." He looked around the coffee shop, then the plastic chairs, the fluorescent lights, the hand-lettered specials board, with an expression of mild, distant pity, like he was visiting somewhere he had read about, but never expected to find himself. Zara looked at the check, then at Dominic. Then she pushed the check back across the table slowly, without urgency, without drama. "The way you return something that was never yours and never could be." "Most people in my position," she repeated. "What position is that exactly?" Dominic's smile didn't waver, but something behind it did. He picked up the check, folded it once, and returned it to his jacket pocket, with the careful, practiced movements of a man who did not show frustration. "My father is 74 years old," he said. "He has a legacy, a reputation that took 40 years to build. A family that has structured itself around certain expectations." His voice remained pleasant, conversational. "You understand that introducing an outside claim at this stage, a claim based on a 20-year-old relationship that your mother chose to end, would be destabilizing for everyone." A pause. "Including you." "Is that a warning?" Zara asked. "It's context," Dominic said. He leaned forward slightly. "I know about your mother's condition. I know about the $112,000 treatment figure Dr. Marsh quoted. I know about the dialysis schedule Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday County General 7th floor. I know about the $4,800 in overdue bills." He let each item land, deliberate, measured. "I know these things because I made it my business to know them, because I want you to understand that I understand your situation completely." He paused. "And I still think you should take the check." Zara looked at him for a long moment. He knew her mother's dialysis schedule. He had named the floor of the hospital. He had said it with the calm of a man who wanted her to understand that the information itself was the message that he could reach into her life and retrieve the most vulnerable details and place them on a coffee shop table between them like playing cards. "You should be careful," Zara said, "about how much you tell people you know about them." She stood. She picked up her bag. "This conversation is over," she said. "Don't call me again." She walked out into the Atlanta morning and stood on the sidewalk and breathed. Slowly. The way her mother had taught her. 1, 2, 3, 4. She was shaking, but not from fear. From the particular contained fury of a person who has been threatened by someone who expected them to be afraid and has refused and knows the refusal will have consequences and has decided that the consequences are less important than the refusal. The consequences came quickly. 2 days later, Beverly collapsed at dialysis. Zara got the call at 2:40 in the afternoon while she was sitting in her suspended Swift Haul van in a parking lot, applying for jobs on her phone. The nurse on the line was calm and professional and said words like stable and precautionary and stress-induced, but underneath all the clinical language was the simple, brutal fact: Beverly had been pushing herself past her limits for weeks. The dialysis sessions were taking more out of her than they were putting back, and her body had finally registered its objection in the most unambiguous way it knew. Zara drove to County General in 11 minutes. 7th floor. Beverly was in a bed by the window hooked to a monitor, her face gray-tinged and smaller than it should have been. She looked at Zara when she came through the door, and her first words were, "I'm fine. Don't look at me like that." "You collapsed," Zara said. I sat down quickly. "There's a difference." "Mom." Dr. Elaine Marsh arrived 20 minutes later. She was a tall black woman in her 40s with the unhurried manner of someone who delivered difficult news regularly and had decided that clarity was a form of respect. She pulled Zara into the hallway. "Your mother's kidneys function has declined faster than our last projection," she said. "We're now at a point where dialysis is managing symptoms rather than maintaining function. She needs a transplant." She paused. "Without it, based on current trajectory, we're looking at 18 months. Possibly less if her stress levels don't come down significantly." "What does the transplant cost?" Zara asked. Her voice was flat and practical because those were the only registers available to her right now. "Without adequate insurance coverage, the full treatment pathway is approximately $112,000. The number sat in the hallway between them like a wall. Zara went back into Beverly's room and sat beside her bed and held her hand. And Beverly, who did not ask for help, who did not complain, who had called insurance companies 14 times and paid out of pocket and said nothing, let her. Raymond arrived 40 minutes later. He appeared in the doorway of the room and stopped. Beverly turned her head and saw him and went completely still. They looked at each other across a hospital room for the first time in 22 years, and the air between them was so dense with unspoken history that Zara felt for a moment like she was sitting inside someone else's memory. "Beverly," Raymond said. Just her name. His voice broke cleanly in half on the second syllable. Beverly looked at him for a long time. Then she said quietly, "You look older." "So do you," he said. "You look beautiful." In the parking lot below, Dominic Caldwell sat in a black SUV with a camera lens pointed at the window of room 714 and took photographs until the light inside the room went out. The courthouse on Spring Street looked different from the outside when you were walking toward it, as a subject rather than a visitor. Zara had driven past this building her entire life. It sat 12 blocks from the apartment where she'd grown up, a fact she now understood was not coincidence. Beverly had chosen their neighborhood, deliberately close enough to keep watch on something, far enough to stay hidden from it. The building was pale stone and federal columns, and the particular architectural language that said authority in a register, designed to make ordinary people feel small before they even reached the door. Zara did not feel small. She felt, if anything, clarified. The way a person gets clarified when everything peripheral has been stripped away and only the essential thing remains. The hearing had been filed by Dominic under a judicial conduct review, a formal challenge to Raymond's mental competency, claiming that a retired judge of advanced age was being manipulated by a woman from his past, and her daughter, that the paternity claim was manufactured, that Raymond's expressed intention to acknowledge Zara publicly represented a deterioration in his judgment, rather than an exercise of it. The filing was precise and well-resourced, and completely cynical, and Howard Finch had spent 6 days preparing a response that matched it on every point. The media was already outside when Zara arrived. Not a large crowd, this was a legal proceeding, not a verdict, but enough cameras and enough reporters with enough microphones to make the front steps feel like a different kind of territory than the inside. Howard met her at the side entrance and walked her through a corridor that smelled of old paper and floor polish, and the specific institutional silence of a building where important things had been decided for a very long time. Raymond was already in the hearing room, seated at a table with Howard and 2 additional attorneys. He looked up when Zara entered and nodded a small, deliberate acknowledgement. He looked tired but composed. The gravity was still there. It would probably always be there. But underneath it, in the set of his jaw and the steadiness of his hand, was something new. Something that looked like a man who had decided after a long time of deciding wrong to stop being afraid. Dominic sat across the room with his legal team. He did not look at Zara when she entered. She was called to the stand first. The hearing officer, a woman in her 50s with close-cropped gray hair and reading glasses on a chain, administered the oath, and Zara stated her name, her age, her occupation. The last word landed in the room with a particular weight. Delivery driver. She said it without inflection, without apology, without the slight downward modulation that people sometimes applied to things they considered lesser. She said it the way her mother had taught her to say every true thing about herself, plainly, because the truth required no adjustment. Howard walked her through the sequence of events. The delivery, the photograph, the conversation with Raymond, the confrontation with Beverly, the meeting with Dominic, and the check, and the coffee shop, and the dialysis schedule recited back to her like a threat. He entered documentation at each stage, Swift Hall delivery records with timestamp and address. The original photograph from Raymond's desk, Beverly's employment records from the federal courthouse under her original name Beverly Harmon, the DNA analysis. Then he placed a shoebox on the evidence table. "Ms. Collins," Howard said, "can you describe the contents of this box?" Zara looked at the shoebox, the one from under Beverly's bed, the one Beverly had carried through 3 apartments and 2 cities and 22 years of deliberate invisibility. A silver bracelet, a photograph, an employment identification card from the federal courthouse issued to Beverly Harmon dated September 1999, and a sealed manila envelope containing documents my mother collected between August and November 2001. What do those documents contain? What do those documents? Evidence of case fixing, internal communications between 2 senior federal judges and representatives of the law firm Hargrove and Stren, payment records, routing information for redirected settlement funds. Zara paused. My mother collected this evidence alone over a period of 4 months. She brought it to Judge Caldwell in good faith. She was subsequently threatened, professionally demoted, and forced to flee the city for her own safety. Another pause. She kept the evidence for 22 years. She never destroyed it, and she never used it for personal gain. She kept it because it was the truth, and she believed the truth should be preserved. The room was very quiet. Dominic's attorney rose for cross-examination. He was a sharp-faced man with expensive glasses and a voice that had been calibrated over decades to sound like reason while functioning as something else entirely. Ms. Collins, isn't it convenient that all of this evidence, your mother's employment records, these documents, this DNA test surfaces at precisely the moment your family faces $112,000 in medical bills? My mother kept those documents for 22 years, Zara said. If this was about money, she had 22 years to come forward. She didn't. You could have researched Judge Caldwell before the delivery, targeted him specifically. The delivery was assigned to me at 6:15 in the morning through an automated dispatch system. I didn't choose the address. You took a photograph in his private study without permission. I took a photograph of my mother's face on a stranger's desk. I'd do it again. A murmur moved through the room. The hearing officer didn't gavel it down. Then Howard Finch stood and entered the final set of documents. Bank records. Email chains recovered through legal discovery. A payment receipt from a property management company connected to a Shell LLC traceable to Dominic Caldwell's personal holding company, dated 4 days after Zara's first visit to the estate, corresponding to the rent increase notice slipped under their door. Phone logs showing calls from a number registered to Dominic's office to Swift Hall's corporate HR department 2 days before Zara's suspension. And a series of emails coordinating the publication of the hospital photograph across 3 separate media outlets, sent from a personal account Dominic had apparently believed was untraceable. Your Honor, Howard said, addressing the hearing officer directly. Dominic Caldwell did not file this competency review to protect his father. He filed it to protect his inheritance. And in doing so, he engaged in a coordinated campaign of financial harassment and intimidation against 2 private citizens, one of them a woman currently hospitalized and awaiting a kidney transplant. Dominic's attorney objected. The hearing officer overruled it. Raymond's recorded testimony played on the screen at the front of the room, filmed 3 days earlier in the study, the mahogany desk behind him, the empty easel where the photograph had been. He spoke for 11 minutes. He was precise, unhurried, and completely lucid. He described Beverly's evidence, his own failure to act swiftly enough, the years of searching the letter never sent. He described Zara, her composure, her directness, the quality of her mind, with a specificity that could not be manufactured. At the end of the recording, he said, I am not confused. I am not being manipulated. I am for the first time in a long time doing the right thing. I am simply sorry it took this long. The hearing officer called a recess. In the hallway, Dominic appeared at Zara's shoulder. His legal team was behind him, but out of earshot. His face had shed the pleasant performance of the coffee shop. What was underneath was less polished. This isn't over, he said quietly. Zara turned and looked at him with the same expression she had used in the entrance hall on the first day when he had spoken without looking up from his phone. The one that was steadier than anger and older than hurt. No, she said, it's not. She walked back into the hearing room and sat down. The hearing officer deliberated for 2 hours and 14 minutes. Zara sat in a waiting room on the 3rd floor with Howard Finch and a cup of coffee she didn't drink. Raymond was in a separate room down the hall on his attorney's advice. The optics of them sitting together during deliberation had been flagged as a potential complication. Beverly was still at County General, resting, watching whatever was on the room television, and refusing, Zara suspected, to watch any news channel. Howard reviewed documents. Zara looked out the window at Spring Street below, at the ordinary traffic of an ordinary Thursday in Atlanta, at people moving through their lives without knowing that upstairs in a federal building, something was being decided that would change the structure of hers. She thought about the morning of the delivery, the 6:15 alarm, the $203 in the checking account, the $67 flat rate and the rush bonus that had felt at the time like a small mercy. She thought about Dominic standing in the entrance hall, not looking up from his phone, saying what he said the way someone says, pass the salt. She thought about her mother at 26 years old, alone in a courthouse building, after hours photographing documents that could end careers. understanding exactly what she was risking, and doing it anyway because the alternative was to know something true and say nothing. That was not something Beverly Collins had ever been able to do. The bailiff appeared at the waiting room door at 3:47 p.m. "They're ready," he said. The hearing officer read the findings in a level, unhurried voice that gave away nothing until it gave away everything. The panel finds that Raymond Caldwell demonstrates full mental competency. The conduct review filing is dismissed with prejudice. Dominic's attorney made a note. The panel further finds that the DNA evidence establishing paternity is conclusive and properly obtained. Zara Collins is the biological daughter of Raymond Caldwell. This finding is entered into the official record. Someone behind Zara exhaled sharply. She didn't turn around. The panel further finds that Dominic Caldwell engaged in a coordinated pattern of financial harassment and intimidation directed at Zara Collins and Beverly Collins, including, but not limited to, interference with employment coordination of unjustified rent increases and unauthorized publication of private medical information. These findings are referred to the appropriate civil court for further action. Additionally, the case-fixing documents submitted into evidence are referred to the Department of Justice for formal review. Dominic sat perfectly still. His face revealed nothing, which revealed everything he had known this was possible and had calculated that the attempt was worth the risk regardless. The face of a man who had lost this particular hand, but was already thinking about the next game. His inheritance, however, was a different matter. Raymond had invoked a conduct clause in his estate documentation, a provision drafted 20 years ago. Raymond would later tell Zara, after a business associate had watched his own family destroy itself over money, and Raymond had decided quietly that he would not leave his children the tools to do the same. Any heir who engaged in demonstrable malicious action against a family member forfeited their claim. The clause had sat in the estate documents for 2 decades unused, waiting. It was no longer waiting. Howard filed the forfeiture motion the same afternoon. Dominic's legal team would contest it. That was certain. That would take time, but the documentation was overwhelming, and the conduct clause was unambiguous, and Howard had spent 6 days making sure of both. Outside the courthouse, on the same pale stone steps where Beverly and Raymond had stood in a photograph 23 years ago, a reporter pushed a microphone toward Zara's face. "Ms. Collins, what do you want people to take away from this?" Zara paused. She looked at the microphone and then past it, at the street, at the city, at the ordinary Thursday, still moving around her. "That the truth doesn't expire," she said, and she walked to her car. Raymond had a mild stroke 4 days later. The doctors said it was stress-related, that the accumulated pressure of the preceding weeks had presented a bill his cardiovascular system had decided to collect all at once. He was hospitalized for 6 days. Zara went every day. Beverly discharged 2 days after the hearing went on the 3rd day, and sat in the chair beside his bed for 3 hours without saying much, which was... Zara had come to understand her mother's most honest form of communication. Raymond recovered. Slowly, with the particular stubbornness of a man who had decided he was not finished yet. His speech was briefly affected and came back. His left hand was briefly weak and strengthened. He was moved from the ICU to a regular room, and then to a rehabilitation facility in Buckhead, where the hallways were wide and the physical therapists were relentlessly cheerful, and Raymond complained about the food with an energy that the nurses found reassuring. Zara visited on a Tuesday afternoon and found him in the rehabilitation garden seated in a wheelchair. He was already negotiating to be rid of reading a legal brief with a yellow highlighter. "You're reading case files in physical therapy," she said. "I'm reading," he said, "because my mind works fine and I need it occupied." She sat beside him. The garden was quiet, late afternoon light coming through the trees the way it had in the courthouse photograph. She had looked at that photograph so many times in the past weeks that it had become something different, less a discovery, and more a document. Evidence of a moment before everything complicated, before choices had been made that sent two people's lives in directions neither of them had chosen freely. "I want to run the foundation," she said. "Not the estate, not anything with Harlow on the door. The Legal Aid Foundation, the whistleblower protection work. That's what I want." Raymond lowered the brief. He looked at her with the assessing gaze she had first seen across the mahogany desk, except that it was different now, less the gaze of a man evaluating a stranger, and more the gaze of a man recognizing something he had been hoping to see. "That's what Beverly would have built," he said, "if she'd stayed." "I know," Zara said. "That's why I want to build it." Raymond nodded slowly. Then he picked up his highlighter and returned to his brief, which Zara had already learned was his way of agreeing to something without making a ceremony of it. In the civil proceeding that followed, Dominic settled out of court. The terms were sealed, but Howard told Zara privately that the number was significant and that Dominic had not enjoyed agreeing to it. He had retreated from public life, no more board positions, no more charity galas, no more presence at the estate events that had previously structured his calendar. Whether this represented genuine reckoning or strategic withdrawal, Zara neither knew nor spent much time considering. She had other things to build. 3 months after the hearing, the photograph went to a museum, not the framed original Raymond kept, that placed it on the same corner of the same desk, next to a new Whataburger cup that Zara had brought him as a joke during his rehabilitation, and that he had kept with the same inexplicable loyalty as the first one. What went to the museum was a larger reproduction, properly matted and labeled, part of a permanent collection on the history of the federal court system in Georgia. The label read, "Beverly Harmon Collins Paralegal Federal Civil Division, 1999 to 2001. Original whistleblower in the 2001 Hargrove Stren case-fixing investigation. Her evidence preserved for 22 years resulted in a 2024 DOJ referral and the posthumous reopening of 17 affected civil cases." Beverly stood in front of it for a long time at the opening. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Zara stood beside her and watched her mother look at her own name on a museum wall, her real name, her full name, the name she had set aside for 2 decades to keep her daughter safe, and saw something in Beverly's face that she had not seen there before. Not pride exactly, something quieter and more fundamental than pride. The expression of a person who has been correctly seen. The kidney transplant had taken place 6 weeks earlier. Raymond had been the donor, a living donor match, confirmed by 3 independent medical assessments, a fact that Beverly had argued against for 2 weeks, with an intensity that told Zara everything about how much she didn't want to need it, and how much she knew she did. The surgery had gone without complication. Recovery was slow and carefully managed, and Beverly had, for the first time in years, allowed herself to be taken care of without redirecting every act of care back towards someone else. She was sitting up. She was reading. She was arguing with her doctors about the recovery timeline, which Dr. Marsh had told Zara privately was the best possible sign. Zara had re-enrolled at Georgia State. Pre-law, as she'd originally intended before Beverly's illness, had made tuition an abstraction and survival a curriculum. The fees were covered. Raymond had established a foundation account, and Zara had negotiated the terms herself with Howard's assistance until they reflected what she was willing to accept and what she was not. She was not willing to accept anything that looked like charity. She was willing to accept what was owed. The distinction mattered to her, and she had made it matter to everyone involved. She kept her Swift Hall jacket. It hung on the hook by the door of her new apartment, a 1-bedroom, the first bedroom she'd slept in for 15 months, in a building near campus with a working elevator and a landlord who fixed things when they broke. She had hung the jacket there on the first day and had not moved it since. Her roommate, a second-year law student named Priya, had asked about it once. "Work uniform," Zara had said. "You still deliver packages?" "No," Zara said. "But I used to, and I want to remember what that felt like." Priya had nodded with the particular tact of someone who understood that some things were not elaborated on. The Legal Aid Foundation opened its doors in November, operating out of a rented office on Auburn Avenue, 4 blocks from the sweet Auburn neighborhood where Beverly had grown up, a fact that Beverly pointed out when they signed the lease, and that Zara suspected was not accidental on Raymond's part. The foundation's stated mission was the protection of whistleblowers in the judicial and legal system. People who found something true and dangerous and came forward with it anyway, and then discovered that the system they had trusted to protect them was often the same system that wanted them quiet. Beverly's name was on the door, not as a memorial, as a founding advisor. She came in twice a week on the days her body allowed it, and sat at a desk by the window and reviewed intake cases with the kind of focused attention that Zara recognized, had always recognized. She understood now as the attention of a person whose mind had been trained for exactly this kind of work, and had simply been denied the space to use it. On a Friday afternoon in late November, Zara drove past the Swift Hall Distribution Center on Harwell Road on her way to the foundation office. The parking lot was full of navy blue vans, drivers loading and checking manifests, the ordinary morning machinery of people doing necessary work for inadequate compensation. She slowed down as she passed, looked at the building, thought about the 6:15 alarm and the $67 flat rate, and the rush bonus and the address in Pinecrest Heights that had been assigned to her through an automated system because everyone more senior was already occupied. One delivery, one photograph, one question. She had asked it because she hadn't known not to. Because the photograph was her mother's face and the bracelet was from Beverly's shoebox. And some things, when you see them, cannot be unseen and cannot be left unasked. She had asked it in a room full of power and old money and the accumulated authority of a man who had spent 40 years being the most important person in every room, and the room had gone silent, and she had stood in the silence and waited, and it had not broken her. It had, if anything, clarified her. That was the inheritance. Not the foundation money, though she would use it carefully. Not the legal recognition, though it mattered. Not the name on the museum wall, or the testimony in the federal record, or the DOJ referral that was right now making life uncomfortable for people who had believed for 20 years that Beverly's evidence had disappeared along with Beverly. The inheritance was this: she knew where she came from. Both sides of it, the couch and the dialysis chair and the 14 phone calls to the insurance company, and also the courthouse steps and the brilliant principled woman who had seen something true and decided it was worth the cost of saying so. She carried both. She was made of both. She pulled into the foundation parking lot and turned off the engine. Through the office window, she could see Beverly at her desk, reading something, her glasses on a cup of tea at her elbow. Raymond was inside, too. He came on Fridays now, drove himself, which his doctors had reluctantly permitted, seated in the chair across from Beverly, saying something that made Beverly look up from her papers with the expression that Zara had once thought Beverly reserved only for her. Zara sat in her car for a moment and watched them through the window. Then she got out, picked up her bag, and walked through the door. Beverly Collins carried a truth for 22 years because she believed it was worth carrying. She lived small and worked hard and said nothing, not because she had nothing to say, but because she understood that some truths spoken too soon or to the wrong people become weapons used against the ones you love. What her daughter taught her, what Zara taught all of them, is that silence has a limit, that the truth does not expire, that dignity is not granted by courtrooms or bloodlines or the approval of people who decide at a glance that you belong at the service entrance. It is carried, quietly, stubbornly, until the moment you set it down in a room that has no choice but to hear it. If this story stayed with you, If you've ever been told you don't belong somewhere, you had every right to drop a comment. Tell me what you took from this. Tell me where you're watching from. And if you're not subscribed yet, this is the story that should change that. There's more where this came from. Don't miss it.